Welcome to Lying and Cheating. Please like this video and subscribe. Lying and Cheating. My wife and I have been married for 4 years, but recently, I discovered something that shattered everything I thought I knew about our relationship. She had an affair with my stepfather, of all people. Even just typing those words feels surreal, like this couldn't possibly be my life. But it is, and now I'm left trying to figure out how everything fell apart so quickly. It's a lot to process, and I've only spoken about it to my close family and therapist. I guess now, I'm ready to lay it all out. Maybe putting it in writing will help me come to terms with it, or at least help me make sense of the chaos. To fully understand how this unfolded, I need to start from the very beginning, give you the background that explains how something like this could happen. It's not an easy story to tell, and it's even harder to accept that it's my reality. But here goes. My wife, Emily, and I are both 26 years old now, but our story goes back much further than just these last few years. We met in middle school, back when we were just 13 years old, in 7th grade. It's crazy to think that we've known each other for more than half of our lives. Back then, we were just kids, awkward and trying to navigate the confusing world of adolescence. We met in class one day, and from that moment on, something clicked between us. It wasn't like we started dating right away, though. We were just friends at first, hanging out with the same group, sharing a few inside jokes, and helping each other with homework. But even then, there was this connection between us that felt different. By the time we reached high school, that connection had grown into something more. We started dating our freshman year, and from that point on, it was like we were inseparable. We went through the typical high school experiences together: football games, homecoming, prom, graduation. All of those big moments that you look back on later in life, we shared them. Everyone in school knew us as that couple. You know the type, the ones who seem like they're destined to be together forever. It wasn't just a phase either. It felt real. We didn't fight much, and even when we disagreed, it never seemed like a big deal. It was like we just got each other, like we understood each other in a way that made everything else easy. In fact, we were so well known as a couple that at prom, we were voted most likely to get married. I remember laughing about it with Emily at the time, but deep down, I knew it wasn't just a joke. It felt like a prediction, a glimpse into a future that seemed inevitable. I knew, even then, that Emily was the person I wanted to spend my life with. And from everything she said and did, it felt like she was on the same page. After high school, most people expected us to go our separate ways, to go off to different colleges and eventually drift apart like a lot of high school couples do. But that didn't happen. Instead, we both ended up going to the same university. It wasn't something we planned intentionally to keep the relationship going. It just worked out that way. We both applied to a few schools, and it just so happened that the one we both liked the most was the same one. So, when we started college, it felt like a continuation of the life we had already built together. We moved into nearby dorms, shared classes, and spent weekends together, just like we always had. In fact, those college years felt like some of the best times in our relationship. We had more freedom, more independence, but we still had each other. Looking back, it seems almost too perfect. We didn't have any of those dramatic breakups or time apart moments that other couples sometimes go through in college. We were solid, always there for each other, always in sync. That's probably why, by the time our junior year rolled around, I decided to propose to her. It wasn't a hard decision. I knew she was the one I wanted to be with. I bought the ring, planned a simple but meaningful proposal, and when the moment came, I asked her to marry me. Of course, she said yes, and just like that, we were engaged. It felt like the most natural thing in the world. We didn't wait long after graduation to get married. As soon as we both had our degrees in hand, we tied the knot. We were 22, young but ready. The wedding wasn't huge, but it was beautiful. We were surrounded by close family and friends, everyone we loved, and it was one of those days that felt like a dream. I remember standing there, looking at her in her white dress, thinking about how lucky I was. I had known this girl since we were kids, and now here we were, starting our life together as husband and wife. It was everything I had ever wanted. At least, that's what I thought. But to really understand how things went so wrong, you need to know a bit about my family situation. My parents got divorced when I was 6 years old, and to be honest, I don't have many clear memories of them being together. It's like that part of my childhood is a blur. I remember little moments here and there, but for the most part, it's just fragments. After the divorce, my mom and I were on our own for a while. She worked hard to support us, taking on long hours and doing everything she could to make sure I had what I needed. I'll always be grateful for that, even though I didn't fully appreciate it at the time. When I was 15, my mom remarried. That's when Tom entered our lives. He was older than my mom by a few years, 52 at the time, and he had an interesting past. He had been a basketball player in his younger years, playing 4 years of college ball at a Division I school. After college, he played overseas for a while, spending about 5 years in different countries. He never made it to the NBA or even the G League, but he had a decent career abroad. He used to tell me stories about playing in places I had never even heard of, about the culture shocks, the travel, the ups and downs of living that kind of life. By the time he met my mom, though, those days were behind him. He had settled into a career as a roofer, a job he's been doing ever since. It's hard work, physically demanding, but it paid the bills, and he seemed content with it. Tom wasn't a bad guy, at least not in the beginning. He was kind to my mom, treated her well, and he was never mean or cruel to me. We didn't have a super close bond, but we got along well enough. He was just there, part of the family, but not someone I felt particularly close to. I've never been much of an athlete, but I've always tried to stay in decent shape. I'm about 5 feet 6 inches, not exactly the ideal height for sports, and that played a big role in why I never got into anything competitive. Don't get me wrong, I've spent a good chunk of my life going to the gym, lifting weights, staying fit, but organized sports just weren't something I saw myself excelling in. It wasn't a lack of interest, really. It was more that I felt I couldn't measure up, especially when most of the guys around me were towering over me. So, I stuck with what I knew, working out, focusing on myself, and staying healthy in my own way. It was enough for me. I wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone, least of all myself. But that part of my life, the whole being 5 feet 6 inches and not an athlete, didn't really matter much once I met Emily. She never cared about stuff like that. She was always more focused on what kind of person I was than whether I could dunk a basketball or run fast. And honestly, that's one of the things I loved about her from the start. She saw me for me, not for what I wasn't. And that's why it hit me so hard when everything unraveled. But before we get there, let me rewind a bit and give you more context. Emily has known my stepfather, Tom, for about as long as I have. We started dating when we were in high school, around the time my mom remarried. So it's not like Tom was some stranger in her life. Anytime I was around him, she was usually there too. We'd visit my mom, go to family dinners, celebrate holidays together. It was normal. And because my mom lived so close to us, just about 5 minutes down the road, we saw them pretty regularly, especially after Emily and I got married. Our marriage felt solid for the most part. We were busy with work and parenting, sure, but that's just how life goes, right? We had a daughter together, a little girl who had just turned 2. She was the light of my life, and honestly, she made all the stress and challenges of being a parent worthwhile. When you become a parent, it's like everything shifts. You're no longer just thinking about yourself or your partner. You're responsible for this tiny human who depends on you for everything. And Emily and I were in that stage where we were trying to balance it all. Work, parenting, our relationship. It wasn't easy, but it didn't feel impossible either. Emily worked as an engineer, and her job was demanding. She was always busy with projects, deadlines, and meetings, but she was good at what she did. I was proud of her for how far she'd come in her career. Meanwhile, I worked in pharmaceutical sales. My job was a bit more unpredictable. I had a lot of freedom in terms of my schedule, but it also meant I was constantly on the go. Most days, I worked an 8 to 4 shift, but depending on how my sales were going, I could be home earlier or later. There were days when I'd finish up early, and others when I'd get stuck working late into the evening. It was all about closing deals and making sure I hit my targets. And since my schedule was always fluctuating, Emily and I didn't always have as much time together as we would have liked, but we made it work. One particular day stands out in my memory, and not in a good way. It was one of those days where everything at work just seemed to fall into place. I managed to close nearly half of my sales by lunchtime, which meant I could head home early. It was a rare opportunity to enjoy some extra free time, maybe relax a little, or even sneak in a workout before the rest of the day caught up to me. I didn't think much of it at the time. I was just happy to be able to clock out early for once. As I pulled into our neighborhood, I immediately noticed something unusual. My stepfather's car was parked down the street, not far from our house. Now, let me explain. Tom isn't the kind of guy who just randomly drops by unannounced. Sure, we lived close to my mom and him, and it wasn't out of the ordinary to see him around. But seeing his car parked there, a few houses down from ours, felt off. At first, I didn't think too much of it. I told myself, oh, he probably knows someone in the neighborhood, because what other reason could there be, right? I sat there in the car for a second, debating whether or not I should text him or just head inside and forget about it. But something about the situation just didn't sit right with me. I mean, why would he be visiting someone on our street when we lived so close? If he was here to see us, he would have parked in front of our house, not halfway down the block. My mind started racing, but I tried to push it aside. Maybe I was overthinking things. I got out of the car and walked toward the house, my mind still buzzing with questions I didn't really want to ask. As I reached the front door, I felt this weird unease settle over me. It wasn't panic, exactly, but more like this nagging feeling that something was wrong. I opened the door, stepping into our quiet home. The house felt still, almost too still, and that only added to the growing discomfort in my gut. I called out for Emily, expecting her to be in the kitchen or maybe with our daughter, but there was no answer. That's when I heard it, a faint noise coming from upstairs. It was muffled, but unmistakable. Someone was up there. I felt my pulse quicken as I headed up the stairs, each step heavier than the last. My heart was pounding in my chest, and every instinct I had was screaming at me to stop, to turn around, to walk back out the front door. But I didn't. I couldn't. I had to know what was going on. As I reached the top of the stairs, I heard voices, one of them unmistakably Emily's. The other voice was deeper, more familiar than I wanted it to be. I froze for a moment, standing there outside our bedroom, feeling like the ground was shifting beneath me. My hands were shaking as I slowly turned the doorknob, pushing the door open just a crack. And that's when I saw them. Emily and Tom, my wife and my stepfather, together, in our bed. The world seemed to stop in that moment. Everything felt surreal, like I was watching a scene from a movie or a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. All I could do was stand there, frozen in shock, as my entire world crumbled in front of me. I always come home through the side door. It's quicker that way, and coincidentally, there's no Ring camera there to catch me entering. On that day, however, as I stepped inside, a sense of unease crept over me. The moment I crossed the threshold, I was met with loud, suspicious noises echoing from upstairs, sounds that seemed to invade my very bones. They were unmistakable, filled with an intimacy that no one should ever have to hear in their own home. Curiosity clawed at me as I crept up the stairs, each step amplifying my anxiety. My heart raced, a drumbeat of dread pounding in my chest. Part of me screamed to turn back, to forget whatever was happening up there, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to know. I reached our bedroom door and paused for a moment, my hand hovering over the doorknob. What I would find on the other side would change everything. Slowly, I pushed the door open. What I saw was beyond anything I could have imagined. My wife, Emily, the woman I loved and trusted, tangled in a passionate embrace with my stepfather, Tom. They were in our bed, the very place where we had built a life together, filled with laughter, dreams, and shared memories. The sight of them together shattered the illusion of my world, and I felt time freeze as I stood there, rooted to the spot, speechless. For what felt like an eternity, maybe 12 to 15 seconds, I was frozen in shock, standing no more than 5 or 6 feet away. Their voices intertwined with the sounds of passion, oblivious to my presence. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. How could this happen in my own home, with the man who had married my mother? My heart dropped, my stomach twisted into knots, and the room around me blurred as reality began to set in. I finally found my voice, fueled by a mix of anger and disbelief. "Emily," I shouted, my voice cutting through the haze of their intimacy like a knife. They turned to me, wide-eyed, as if they had been caught in the act of a crime. I could see the shock wash over their faces, and for a brief moment, everything hung in the balance. "What are you doing here?" Emily stammered, her cheeks flushed with a mix of shame and surprise. It felt like the most ludicrous question she could have asked. How could she not understand? I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but all that came out was a choked, "How could you do this?" Her response hit me like a punch to the gut. The only words she repeated were, "I just needed something different." Those words echoed in my mind like a haunting refrain, a clear dismissal of everything we had built together. I felt the weight of betrayal settle in my chest like a heavy stone. My heart raced, and I was left grappling with the unbearable truth of her infidelity. I stumbled backward, leaving them behind, the reality of what I had just witnessed crashing down on me. I rushed out of the room, the world around me blurring into chaos. How long had this been going on? I didn't know when it had started, but I knew they had known each other for 11 years. Was it 5 years? 10? Every moment of our relationship replayed in my mind, tainted with doubt. I stumbled down the stairs and out the front door, my hands shaking as I fumbled for my keys. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life, filled with anger and confusion. I couldn't stay there, not after what I'd seen. I needed to escape, to put distance between myself and the betrayal that lingered in the air. The following weeks blurred together in a haze of heartbreak and anger. I found myself grappling with a painful reality I never thought I would face. The divorce process began, and with it came a torrent of emotions I had to navigate. Each day felt heavier than the last as I dealt with the shock of losing the life I had built with Emily. I was forced to confront the pain of what she had done, all while trying to keep my life together for the sake of our daughter. Through it all, my thoughts often turned to my mother. I couldn't shake the image of her face, filled with joy, completely unaware of the storm brewing in our lives. The thought of her discovering the truth about her husband and my wife filled me with dread. I knew she would be crushed, and that knowledge weighed heavily on my heart. I felt like I was not just losing my marriage, but also putting my mother through unimaginable pain. As if that wasn't enough, I found myself questioning my own identity. I never thought I would feel less of a man, but here I was, grappling with insecurities I never knew existed. I had always prided myself on being a supportive partner, and now I felt like a failure. I wrestled with feelings of inadequacy and despair, wondering how I could have missed the signs. Was I that oblivious? After the initial shock wore off, I decided I had to take control of my life. I needed to do something, anything, to reclaim my sense of self. So, I began going to therapy, seeking help to untangle the mess of emotions swirling inside me. I joined a support group for people going through similar situations, hoping to find solace in shared experiences. It wasn't easy, but slowly, I started to piece my life back together. I also took a good look at my lifestyle. I began hitting the gym more frequently, rediscovering the joy of exercise as a way to channel my anger and frustration. Each drop of sweat felt like a small victory, a reminder that I was still capable of taking charge of my life. I also reconnected with old friends, seeking their support and companionship. They reminded me that I wasn't alone in this, that I still had people who cared about me. Despite all the chaos and heartbreak, I focused on my daughter. She became my guiding light amid the storm. The love I felt for her was unwavering, and I was determined to be the best father I could be. I threw myself into parenting, cherishing every moment spent with her. I wanted to create a stable, loving environment for her, despite the upheaval surrounding us. Yet, even with all the work I was putting into healing, the question of whether I would ever find love again loomed large in my mind. Would I ever trust someone fully again? It felt like a distant dream, overshadowed by the betrayal I had experienced. But as time passed, I found a flicker of hope. I started to believe that, one day, I could rebuild my life and open my heart again. As I navigated the complexities of life after the affair, I began to see the possibility of a new beginning. I learned to set boundaries, to value myself, and to understand that I wasn't defined by someone else's choices. The road ahead would be challenging, but I was determined to emerge stronger from this experience. I refused to let it break me. With each passing day, I found myself looking forward to the future. The wounds were still fresh, but I knew they would heal. I was learning to embrace uncertainty, to find strength in vulnerability. My journey towards self-discovery and healing had just begun, and I was ready to take it one step at a time. And as the dust began to settle, I found a sense of clarity. I had been dealt a rough hand, but I was ready to forge my own path. Life had thrown me a curveball, but I was determined to reclaim my narrative, one chapter at a time.